The year is 1770 at the Imperial Court in Vienna. A crowd of nobles stares at a wooden cabinet with a chessboard on top. And behind it sits a life-size mannequin dressed in ornate Ottoman robes and wearing a turban. Its inventor opens the cabinet doors to show there is nothing inside but intricate clockwork. He winds the machine with a key. Then the wooden man reaches out, grips a pawn, and makes a move. It becomes known as the Mechanical Turk, and it didn't just play chess, it won chess. For 84 years, it toured Europe and America, beating nearly everyone who faced it, reportedly including Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin. Newspapers at the time asked if humans had built a thinking machine. But here's the thing. It was a lie. Inside the cabinet, hidden behind the gears and sliding panels, sat a human chess master, cramped up in the dark, tracking the board with magnets, steering the arm with levers. It wasn't a thinking machine, but it was a parlor trick. It was magic. And for decades, that secret held. Now, don't get me wrong, plenty of people suspected it was a trick. But the thing is, nobody could prove it. Now, that was 250 years ago, and today, machines that claim to think are practically everywhere. They're on your phone, in your car, your banking app, your doctor's office. And some of those claims are perfectly legitimate. Others, as we're going to see, are still hiding a person behind the proverbial cabinet. So the question is, how do you tell the difference? What actually counts as artificial intelligence and what's just a label? And when something actually is AI, more importantly, what kind of AI is it? By the end of this video, I'll provide you 4 questions that, when asked together, will get you the answer. If you poll a random segment of your friends, or even experts for that matter, with the question, what exactly counts as AI? I'm willing to bet you won't get a single consistent response. Robots? ChatGPT? Your Roomba? Well, those are all examples of tools that may use AI, but they don't describe AI itself. What makes this tricky is that the label AI is applied so loosely to so many things that it has nearly stopped meaning anything at all. So let's try to get to the bottom of this by going back to where the term originally came from. In the summer of 1956, a mathematician named John McCarthy gathered a group of researchers at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire to give birth to a field centered on a bold belief that thinking machines were possible. Writing the pitch for that summer's meeting a year earlier, McCarthy had given the new field a name: artificial intelligence. The meeting proposal contains a famous conjecture. Every feature of learning and of intelligence itself can in principle be described so precisely that a machine can be made to simulate it. For example, if human chess playing involves recognizing positions, evaluating options, planning ahead, and choosing a move, then those abilities can be described with enough precision that a machine should be able to artificially simulate a human chess player. But if you carefully reflect on the conjecture from that summer, there's a subtle problem. They defined artificial intelligence using the word intelligence, and that's a term that humans have never agreed on. What is intelligence anyway? Is it arithmetic? Is it chess? Is it grammatical skills? Is it recognizing a face, getting a joke? There's an ongoing debate on what intelligence itself even means, which probably explains why the artificial version of it is not so straightforward to define. Every time a machine masters an ability, we're inclined to change our minds about whether that ability actually counted as true intelligence or not. For example, in the 1950s, machines that did arithmetic faster than any human could were widely celebrated in the press as electronic brains. But today, that power sits in cheap calculators, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone that would actually call adding up numbers intelligent. For a lot of history, chess was seen as this true, rigorous test of thinking, and I remember in my own childhood, friends telling me that only smart people could play chess, which, true story, I was not very good at. Now, that was until IBM's Deep Blue AI beat chess world champion Garry Kasparov in 1997. And I remember pretty soon after that, those same friends started writing off chess as just another game of brute force memorization. So asking whether a thing is intelligent or not is actually kind of a trap. Instead, let's take a practical approach here by labeling AI systems according to how they work. And to figure that out, we're going to need a few questions, 4 specifically, asked in order. Question 1 is, does it decide? Or does it just execute? Question 2 is, who wrote the rules? Was it people or was it data? Question 3 is, who decided what it pays attention to? And finally, question 4 is, does it judge things or does it make things? Your answers to these 4 questions can place any AI tool on a practical ladder that avoids having to define that slippery word intelligence. If it only executes, it's simple automation. If it makes decisions using rules that people wrote, it's a rules-based system. If it learned those rules from data, but with a little scaffolding from people, we call that machine learning. If it learned the rules from data without any scaffolding from people, that's deep learning. And finally, if it generates new things instead of judging existing things, it's generative AI. Now, I realize that's probably a bit abstract, so let's discuss a few examples of each system to help build your intuition. So let's get started with question 1. We're going to ask, does the machine decide or does it just execute? Your washing machine runs exactly the cycle on its dial. It doesn't make decisions. A garage door opens when you press the button. Again, no decisions. Same input, same response every time. That's what simple automation is. It's not AI, at least not in the contemporary use of the word. So moving to question 2, we're going to ask, who wrote the rules? People or data? Your bank's ATM is an example of a system that relies on strict if-then-else logic to make decisions. Put in the wrong PIN? No entry. Wrong password too many times? Your account gets locked. That logic was almost certainly written out entirely by a human. Thousands of if-then-else rules stacked into a rules-based AI system. Now, admittedly, you don't think of these rules-based systems like your ATM as being very smart. But before you write those systems off entirely, I have to tell you a story about how convincing a pile of rules can actually be. In 1966, an MIT computer scientist named Joseph Weizenbaum built a program he called ELIZA. And it played therapist. And honestly, its gimmick was embarrassingly simple. It wasn't millions of if-then-else rules, but instead, it just kind of matched patterns in your sentence and turned them around back at you. For instance, if you typed, "I'm unhappy about my job," then Eliza would thoughtfully reply, "Why are you unhappy about your job?" If you responded it was because your manager was terrible, it would then respond, "Well, what about your manager is terrible?" The trick here is that it understood nothing, and Weizenbaum knew that. After all, he wrote every single one of the rules himself. But here's what's even more surprising. It's how people reacted to the system. It's reported that when Weizenbaum's secretary tried Eliza out, even though she had watched him build the program from scratch herself over many months, and she knew exactly what it was, she still insisted that he leave the room so she could talk to Eliza in private. Imagine, she wanted privacy with a machine. Does that sound familiar? Weizenbaum was so shaken by how easily people opened up that he spent much of the rest of his life warning about the readiness to see minds in machines. You can check out his 1976 book, Computer Power and Human Reason, if you're curious to learn more about that. So one more thing about rules-based AI before we move on. Even though it's an old and a rigid way to build intelligence, it has some real strengths. You can read every rule and know exactly why it acted or didn't. There's astonishing accountability, but it's brittle. It only handles what its authors wrote down. So if you wander off Eliza's script, the illusion collapses. But for decades, rules-based systems were the best we had. To break through their limitations, the rules needed to come from somewhere else. That somewhere else is data. When the answer is data, the machine learns to work out the rules from examples. And that's what we call machine learning, because it's learning rules from examples. Sort of like how we do. Your spam filter is the classical example of a traditional machine learning system. The engineers who build spam filters do not write tens of thousands of rules about every possible kind of junk mail imaginable. Instead, most mail clients let you, the user, just report junk. They take those messages that you and millions of other people labeled, and they show them to a machine. This one is spam, this one is not. And from those examples, machine learning allows the system to work out which clues statistically separate the two mail piles, the spam and the good stuff. The system might learn that certain words, specific senders, or links are more likely to be spam, and when spammers change tactics, as long as people keep labeling, nobody has to reprogram anything. Fresh examples arrive, and the recipe updates itself. That is the deep shift. From relying on humans to program out the answers, to programming the ability to find the answers into the machine itself. But classical machine learning still needs some human help. Engineers still decide in advance which clues the system should even look at and which it should ignore. For example, the number of exclamation marks in the message might be more useful to pay attention to, while the font type might be less relevant, unless you're using Comic Sans. Those hand-picked clues are called features in machine learning, and choosing them was the hard, expensive, human part of the job. Which brings us to question 3. Who decided what the machine pays attention to? See, for email, people can list useful clues, but now try writing clues for spotting a cat in a photo. Seriously, pause the video and go give it a shot. Pointy ears? So has a fox. Whiskers? Those are invisible from behind. How about fur? Well, not in a hairless cat. The problem is that every clue you provide will come with 1,000 exceptions. So we're stuck. Because to a computer, a photo is just a grid of millions of colored dots. But to a human, a cat is a complex hierarchy of interconnected visual patterns that are too subtle for anyone to spell out. This is where deep learning comes in. And its answer to question 3 is both radical but shockingly simple. You don't pick the clues at all. Instead, you have the machine learn in layers. The first layer finds very simple patterns in the image. For example, lines. The next layer identifies slightly more complex patterns that are composed of those simple patterns it learned in the first layer. For example, a triangle is 3 lines, and so on and so forth, layer after layer after layer, until the machine can, totally on its own, describe all possible visual rules needed to identify something complex, like a cat. But just like with the spam filtering, learning these rules requires data. But unlike the spam filtering, people are no longer providing any clues. So naturally, deep learning requires significantly more examples compared to a machine learning system. And by a lot, I mean in the millions of labeled photos. But I think we can agree there are no shortage of cat images on the web, with more getting generated every day. And with so much data available, nobody has to choose what to look for. You can let the machine just figure it out. That's the deep in deep learning. It's how your phone unlocks your face and how your photo app finds a picture of your cat every time. It also produced one of AI's eeriest moments. In 2016, a deep learning system called AlphaGo faced Lee Sedol, a legendary champion of Go. Go is a game with more possible positions than atoms in the observable universe. And in Game 2, on move 37, AlphaGo played a stone so strange that commentators assumed it was a mistake, a fluke. By its own estimate, a human would play it one time in 10,000. It played it anyway, and it won. By seeing patterns that 3,000 years of human play had never surfaced. So we have one question left to help us understand what AI is. It's question 4. Does the system judge things or make things? Everything we've covered so far judges. Spam or not spam? Cat or not cat? Good move or bad move? The output is a label. It's a score or a decision. But generative AI flips the direction. A request goes in and new content comes out. A paragraph, an image, a voice, working computer code. Chatbots are the famous example. But under the hood, it's still deep learning, trained on enormous amounts of human writing, with one deceptively simple job. Predict the next word. And then the next, and then the next, and the next, and the next, and so on. Done well enough and at scale, this comes out as something that looks like conversation, like reasoning, like poetry. It's incredible, whether that's real understanding or a spectacular imitation is a genuinely open debate. For today, the category is what matters. Generative AI is AI that produces a poem about your cat, rather than just deciding if a photo is a cat or not. So there it is. There's your toolkit. To understand what is and isn't AI, and maybe more importantly, what the AI is doing, ask yourself 4 questions. 1, does it decide? 2, who wrote the rules? 3, who chooses the clues or the features? And 4, does it judge or does it generate? 4 questions, 1 ladder. Automation, rules-based AI, machine learning, deep learning, and finally, generative AI. And notice what every kind of AI shares. None of it is intelligence from nowhere. Each runs on a kind of borrowed human intelligence, but stored in a different place. Rules that experts wrote. Examples that people labeled. The ocean of text and images humanity has created and curated. These systems do not replace intelligence, but instead, they imitate it. That's what's artificial about artificial intelligence. So, what is artificial intelligence? Well, it's a family of ways to get machines to do work it used to take human judgment to accomplish. And what is it not? A fixed script, a marketing sticker, or a person hidden in a cabinet. Next question, why does this technology matter so much right now? That's the next video, and I'll see you there.